about time-lapse today. Time lapses are pretty cool and they add different feeling to your videos. And today I'm going to show you two different methods how you can take time lapses. They are pretty straight, easy forward, so you can do them as well. And when shooting a time lapse or even long exposure, you definitely need two things: time and patience. And patience is a tricky point. But now let's talk actually about the two methods, the gear we need to do so, and also a few extra tips and tricks how you can make your time lapse even more interesting. For the gear you basically need four things. You need a tripod, you need a camera, you need a lens, and it doesn't matter which sort of lens it is. It can be a prime lens, it can be a zoom lens, any sort of lens will do the job. And ideally, to get the most motion blur, you would like to have a variable ND filter as well. If your camera can shoot an interval timer, this is definitely handy, because you can say you want to shoot 240 images or 240 seconds, and you just set your interval timer to the amount of pictures, how many pictures or when the picture will be taken every 2 seconds, every second. So an interval timer will definitely help to speed up a process. However, if your camera couldn't or wouldn't have an interval timer, you could trigger your camera manually with a trigger remote control, or even just like set your camera to a timer, 2 seconds timer, press a shutter button, and you take an image every couple of seconds or minutes, depends how many pictures you might want to take. So gear wise, pretty straightforward. A tripod, Gorilla pod, or even just like a little Manfrotto pod, whatever you got. Any sort of stabilization will do the job, a camera, a lens. And to get the most motion blur into your time lapse, you need a variable ND filter to slow down your shutter speed. Let's talk about the two methods you can use to shoot a time lapse. The first method would be the traditional way, the picture method, where you say you would take 240 images, which gives you a 10-second time lapse in a timeline of 24 frames per second. There, of course, is a way, or there's a difference. You can decide to shoot JPEG versus RAW. I personally shoot JPEG because the file size is smaller, and also I don't need to do too many post-processing on the images itself. I'm going to make sure that my shutter speed, my aperture, and my ISO is set correctly, and then I shoot my time lapse in JPEG, and I just need to import the JPEGs into my timeline, and I got basically my time lapse. However, to get more out of the images, you can shoot RAW as well, but keep in mind that as more images as you take, as bigger your file storage will be. And quite frankly, if you shoot, let's say, 240 images, which is a 10-second time lapse, there will be quite a bit of data coming together. You need to storage as well, and your computer need to process as well. And as I mentioned already, if you could shoot the interval timer, it's even easier. You could say every 2 seconds you take an image, up to 240 images, and your camera will do everything automatically and will take every 2 seconds an image until you reach 240 images. Definitely handy to have, but if you don't, no problem, you can do it manually as well, and you hit the shutter button every couple of seconds. However, to get the most motion blur into your time lapse, it's definitely recommended to have a variable ND filter that you can slow down your shutter speed to a seconds of a shutter speed, or maybe half a second shutter speed. You want this motion blur going through your images as much as possible. However, also keep in mind, as more or as closer you take your images together, your time lapse will feel faster than you take every 3 or 4 seconds an image. There are two tips which I definitely recommend when you shoot a time lapse in a traditional way with a picture format. First of all, set your camera to manual focus and set your focus manually. For the simple reason you don't want to have any lens hunting or autofocus hunting within your time lapse, and it will just look more professionally when there's no hunting of a lens. Second tip also would be to close down your aperture to a quite small aperture, such as like f/18, f/11, f/12. It really depends on how strong your variable and defilter is and what sort of time on a day you shoot your time lapse. For the simple reason you would like to have as much in focus as possible. And one more little thing is, if you want to make your time lapse even more interesting, you could add a bit of motion in post to make your time lapse more interesting. Zoom a bit in, zoom a bit out, just to give your time lapse a bit of feeling, motion to it, and your time lapse will feel straight differently and looks way more interesting than it would be just a static shot. So the second method would be the video method. And let's say you would shoot 24 frames per second, you got a shutter speed of 40th of a second or even 50th of a second. You can shoot it in f-log or in film simulation, and you just let the camera run and run and run, and you leave the camera on for a couple of minutes. You import your footage, your video into your program to edit it and speed up to 400-500% your clip, and you basically got a time lapse as well. However, there are a few downsides to it. The file size will be probably quite large, and you won't have as much motion blur in your time lapse as you would like to have with the traditional way. So that purely comes down to you can't reduce your shutter speed too slow. As an example, if you do this with a Fujifilm system, and let's say you would shoot 24 frames per second, you just can slow down a shutter speed to 24th of a second. You can't go lower, therefore you probably will be a bit limited with your motion blur in your time lapse when you're doing the video version. However, sometimes I do this and use the video version. Just let the camera run and speed up a part of a video I would like to have as a time lapse. Another little downside is the file format will be quite big, and it doesn't matter if you shoot it in film simulation, if you shoot it in f-log, or even in a picture format. All three versions, the file size might be quite big because you gather a lot of data, but in generally speaking, those two versions are the two easiest versions how you can shoot a time lapse. I personally prefer the picture version. I found it a bit easier and also easier to get more motion blur into my time lapse as well. And the third version would be the easiest. You can use your iPhone or your phone, and you got already a time lapse program built into your camera as well. But this isn't the reason why you've been here, guys. And with that said, guys, I hope those two methods been helpful to you, and you're gonna give it a try, and you're gonna see how those time lapses will enhance your video, and your video will just look differently. You can shoot a time lapse wherever you are. You can shoot it out of your window in the morning, as I did earlier, as you did see the sunrise. I've literally shot it out of my bedroom window just because it was a beautiful sunrise. However, guys, I hope this video was helpful to you, and if it was, hit the thumbs up button, like, comment and subscribe, and I'm gonna see you, my friend, very soon in another video. Cheers, guys.